There are two goals for this lesson. 1. Using what you learned previously to draw your first tree. 2. Get introduced to working in plein air, or outside. Working in plein air is not an easy task. You may be prone to getting distracted from the artwork. The birds sing and make calls. The wind rustles in the leaves and blows in your face. The sun goes in and out of clouds, changing the light and shadow contrasts and making you colder or hotter. Your first and plein air works should be drawings, not paintings. Drawing and sketching small studies outside will help you ease into plein air painting. In drawing, you focus on shapes and values. In painting, you have to deal with a heavy load of color information. And I'm not even talking about the composition. It's too early for that. Don't be too eager to start painting in plein air. Save yourself from wasting time and art supplies, from frustration and disappointments. Go outside when you are ready and start with simple drawing and sketching of plants, trees, and flowers. Get used to drawing outside in one spot for a couple of hours. Learn to ignore the wind and the noise. Get your eyes used to the bright sun, because sunglasses are not a friend of plein air drawing and painting. Fine-tune your plein air toolkit with supplies that are helpful to you. What is your preference? Big hat or rather an umbrella for shade? Maybe mechanical pencils are best for you rather than wooden ones to eliminate the sharpener and save space in your backpack. All these are best achieved in small increments, over time, step by step. The main goal is to continue going in plein air and keep practicing drawing. Pretty soon you will be able to make the next step, painting on plein air. Keep this in mind. Drawing and painting from life is not only the best way to learn, it is the only way to learn how to see, think, and create as an artist in the classical sense of the word. Enjoy this lesson, Introduction to Drawing a Tree in Plein Air. Also, like, share, subscribe, leave your comments, questions, and suggestions for more videos in the comment section below. So what we are doing qualifies as plein air.
Plein air.
Plein air comes from the French term en plein air, meaning outdoors.
Outdoor.
Yeah, on fresh air basically.
Yeah.
You are out on fresh air and you are drawing, painting from life.
Oh.
As opposed to in the studio. So, some long time ago, before artists were able to put their paints into tubes and carry them with them easily, they were more stuck in the studios because of all the supplies and things necessary to prepare the paint for painting. Once they started to put it more on into tubes, into containers they could carry with them fairly easily, they started to go more and more outdoors to paint. And in France, the artists went out and painted a lot outdoors, and they started promoting it as a kind of painting style where you create the entire painting outdoors. And that is where all the terms like à la prima, which is also a French term, à la prima means right from the beginning, like prima, primary, the first.
Primary.
So you paint the painting from start to finish. And you do it all like from beginning to an end in more or less one session. And a la prima is when you don't do the traditional, like in the studio, academic painting where you first draw it out, then you do underpaint, like lower layers of painting where it's just all basic light value and a little bit of color. And then you start slowly working on more details in the painting. All right? That was a longer process in the studio. A la prima is the opposite. Here's the canvas, you get started, bam, 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 you're done.
So it's a sketch.
Well, it's like a study. So that's another French term, étude, which means a study. comes from, where you are doing quick little paintings on location, and you end up with a lot of little studies. You concentrate either on color value or mood, or you're trying to capture the atmosphere. You can concentrate on one or two aspects of the painting, or you can try capture everything all at once. But you can also do paintings that are larger, so not just one session and you're done. You can do a larger painting on location by coming back to the same spot day after day in the same weather, same conditions at the same time. So the sun's in the same position in the sky, so your light and shadow is the same as it was yesterday.
How can you like really capture that again? Just being in like the same weather and all, because it doesn't always come.
Especially in California, we can have completely different weather from one day to another, right? But basically, more inland, the weather is a little more inland. There are climates where it doesn't change so much from day to day. Or what I do here is, I've lived here for so long that I know what the weather is going to be like in any particular season. So I know all the spots where I would like to paint during certain conditions, like with the fog rolling in, or with the clouds, or with the sun being low in the atmosphere like we're coming to now because of winter. The sun's lower and lower in the sky. So even during the day, in the middle of the day, you can find really nice light angles, especially in the mountains, because the sun's so low. To where in the summer the sun's up so high, it's shining almost straight down. It washes out all the colors, hardly any shadows are visible. And if you try to paint in those conditions, the paintings end up being less interesting. So unless you have like heavy clouds, thunder clouds, and sun's up above, then it creates really cool light effects. Because of the clouds casting big shadows onto the ground, and that creates more interesting light effects for you.
Because it's a light source.
Right, and especially if it's clouds, means it could also be a little mistier. High humidity creates more of the atmospheric effects. Then you pretty much don't care that it's during the day. Like all past week, I spent up on the ridge over there. Because we had so many clouds during the day, I didn't care whether it was middle of the day, earlier or later in the day.
Because it's going to be the same.
Because there were like really interesting clouds, light effects, and the clouds shading parts of the ground and not other parts. You could still work with some interesting stuff going on. You can see they're all sitting there drying. So what we're doing is plein air and drawing a tree, drawing that plant that you did, and drawing the bird can all qualify as being part of plein air or prepared for plein air. For painting outdoors. Because where do you find most of your animals? Outdoors usually, right?
Yeah.
So where do you find your plants? Outdoors. It's best to learn both. Doing it in the studio where you can like relax, the sun's not beating down on you, the wind's not blowing, you can relax, concentrate, study it. And then when you get a little bit more experience, the weather is cooperating, you can go outdoors and practice doing it there. So that's what we do. So a little tree is a good to start with.
Yeah.
So I'll do a quick sketch so you have plenty of time to do your own. So how are we gonna look at the tree? Again, we're gonna see how wide it is compared to how tall it is, right? Somewhere in this space, I'm gonna fit my tree. So how wide is the whole tree compared to how tall? So I see that my tree is slightly less tall than it is wide. So if I say that my tree is not going to be taller than this line, and it's not going to be lower than this line, this is where the tree trunk is going to be coming out of the ground. This is where the canopy is going to end. The highest portion of the canopy will end along this line. Then this is my height for the tree. This is the overall height. In that case, I will take my height sideways, and because I know that my tree is just a little bit wider, so this is the square, right? This is where it's equal height to width, but my tree is a little bit wider. And I'm not doing a super precise measurement, but I'm just trying to get close. Okay, I'm taking the basic measurement, and I'm laying it out here a little more intuitively with a little guidance of the measurement. So here's our window. It fits nicely into the page. That's not the problem. All right. So what would the next step be? Since I've created this rectangle that represents the tree abstractly, right? It's like our block of marble out of which we're going to be carving out the more detailed tree. So now I would like to find the tree trunk where it attaches to the ground. Where along this line is the tree trunk? It's obviously coming out a little more toward the right than toward the left, right? Because if we imagine that this is the center of our rectangle, which means it's kind of like the center of our tree. And I'm going in there and I'm doing the site measurement to find the center of the tree. And I'm seeing that that little branch that kind of comes right out of the tree trunk, see, it kind of goes right through the center of the tree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you want me to go out there and point?
Yeah.
So from where I'm standing, this branch here becomes the middle of the whole tree. This is one half and this is the other, compared to the entire canopy, right?
I see.
All right. So then I'm keeping my eye on this center here, because that somewhere in here is going to be that branch. And the tree trunk is kind of coming out of, well, it's connected to the tree trunk in kind of like this manner, right?
Yeah.
So now we know that the tree trunk is somewhere in here, but where is it? Is it a little closer this way? Is it a little bit this way? Where is it compared to the canopy, which is going to be kind of like taking up all of this area? This is our canopy, right?
Yeah.
The abstract vision of the canopy. So if this is the half, I'm going to kind of like, you can basically drop a straight line from that tree branch with your pencil completely vertically and see where is the tree trunk compared to that, and drop a straight line from this edge of the canopy down and see where the tree trunk is there. And what I'm seeing is the tree trunk is definitely closer to this vertical and not to this vertical.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah,
it's
I
like
see.
you are breaking this half into more lines. So you drop this straight line, you drop this straight line, you see that this space is less, this space is more. You don't even really need to measure it unless you are totally confused. But I'm pretty sure that by now you can pretty much say, like, yeah, if I put my tree trunk right in here, coming out of the ground,
It would be good enough.
it will be close, right? This is considerably smaller space, this is considerably larger space.
Yeah.
All right, so we also see that the tree trunk is heading toward here somewhere. This, where the branch pops up, is a little closer to the top, but we can also measure because we now have this. Where does this tree branch pops up through the center? Is it closer to this upper portion? Is it lower? Where do we see it? Because this is kind of shaping up to be our other center. So what I'm seeing is like those lower leaves, right?
Yeah.
They kind of pop up, the tree branch pops up above them, right where the center is. So we have this line as our horizontal center, right? This one half, this is another half. But now we have this half that is, here's one half, here's the other half. See, two halves here. This is our whole center, like the bullseye for our whole composition, right? And what I'm seeing is that this whole bunch of leaves, basically, all of these leaves here, where you're looking at above them, where you see the tree branch, this is the center.
That's the.
This is one half, and that's the other half to the top of the canopy.
But that's like a very small portion of the tree.
Uh-huh.
Like this part over here is like the center.
Right. It's the branch itself is a small portion of the tree, but where it crosses the branch that's in the center, right?
Yeah.
Where this bunch of leaves on the branch cross this branch, this is near the center. But where it ends on the bottom, we see a lot of tree trunks, so yeah, it is a small portion. Okay, we'll get to that.
There's a lot of fuzzies.
Yeah. So, all right, so overall we have something like this going on now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's our tree branch, and we can even darken it right here because we're sure that we're seeing it. We have other tree branch coming out kind of at an angle like that, forming this mass of leaves here. Then it's going a little bit down. See how you can even get the angle of all the leaves transferred here. So what I put my pencil in the measurement to this end of the branch and the other end of the branch where all the leaves are kind of sloping like that. And so I got this. And then I see that it's heading up. Again, you can like check out the main direction of your canopy with the air measurement, transfer the angle and see like, okay, it's something like this going on.
Do you not get distracted by the blowing leaves?
No.
Oh.
You can tune it out because they only blow a little bit. They don't get moved in a considerable direction, considerable way. So, so remember how I had it first as like a basic oval. So now we are like establishing more of our shapes here.
So we're breaking it down first?
Yeah. Now we're like more concentrating on what
The shape?
What the shapes are doing.
The main shape?
Mm-hmm. And so since we have this little branch here already, we can see like that from this tree trunk, there's another branch that is coming out from right behind these leaves. It's attaching here to the main tree trunk, right behind there. Can't quite see it, but you see that it's heading right toward this tree trunk. It's coming out in this direction. That's good. And then you see that it's actually splitting, right? And one of the branches goes right toward this shape here, right toward this. So as I was drawing these lines here, I realized that they have to correspond to this branch. This branch corresponds to this, and this one's coming out of that. So that's why I went in here, I brought this one out, and now I'm making this one split into all these branches. So this one's heading toward here, kind of toward this point. While we're at it, this one of them continues straight through. Another one comes on the opposite side, kind of like that. Another one comes from behind here, goes a little bit out, and then almost the same way up. And there's a couple more breaking off, but now we're starting to get to where it's harder to see, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, and this being a small small quick sketch is not as important. So, okay, we've gotten this positioned here. That means that we can basically say, okay, where are we not seeing much of the tree branches? We're still seeing them somewhat here. We are not seeing they're like blending with all the leaves right in here somewhere. And one of these branches kind of brings us right into this point here. This becomes one of the a little more distinct points in the canopy. This is another distinct point in the canopy. This is where I see it come down a little bit steeper. The leaves are forming that kind of shape. And this is where it starts to go toward this point, and then it kind of gets cut off.
When you're drawing like a tree, like let's say it's like a main focus of like a painting, do you try to do like the little details on the leaves?
So if this tree was up close and it was like one in the foreground, I would get more detail into it, especially if it's taking up a considerable space in your overall composition. If this tree was in the distance, it would basically, I would go like this, and I would just make sure that this is lower and this is higher, and it would be like this looking.
Shaded.
And then I would basically sketch it in like this, and then if I wanted to add, like there was sun, shadows, and I wanted to make it look a little better, I'd say, okay, if like this will be mostly in the sun, this will be mostly in the shadow. I would give it a little more irregularities, a little more shadow here, a little more areas where there's light on the various portions of the canopy. All of this will go in the shadow. Branch, tree branch. Get a little few leaves kind of breaking off, maybe, depending again on how close, how far away it is, how much I want to do in terms of detail, like this. And then the tree trunk, I would just make sure that it looked a bit more realistic in terms of shape, because if somebody knows this landscape, they'll recognize it, and then I'd say, okay, and then there's obviously the shadow on the ground that is needed.
Oh, that's really good. Right.
What kind of shadow does it cast, right?
Yeah.
Is there any light popping through and so on? Approximate.
So it's very simple.
Right.
Like it looks like almost anyone else could do it.
Yeah. But you can do sketches like that, and you should practice doing sketches like that, definitely. What you will find is that you will get better and better as you do more of the long-term sketches.
And then does it like automatically like
Go away, Nala. Go away.
does it like automatically improve your sketches as well? Like,
Yeah.
If you're like start off as this and then soon your sketches will look something like this. Oh.
So let's continue over here.
Okay.
So you see, I did that one because I already kind of studied it by telling you all about how to get started. I've already studied the shape, so I could quickly sketch it out like that. So all right, so we got these leaves here. There's a little, just a reminder that there's another little tiny branch coming out of this connection here, right? Okay. There's like all these leaves here that I'm looking just for basic shape that those leaves do form when they all connect to each other. This is here, it's kind of like a little more connected, unified into one shape. I see that from this here, just a little lower, is coming out one major branch. I can barely see it between the leaves, but I see that it is there, and it's coming out and pointing right into here. In fact, it's, yeah, it's pointing more into this corner, but from it right here, there's like a whole bunch of other branches coming out. I'll sketch it in even though you don't see it all that well. It will be helpful because we want to establish all the points in the tree that the canopy forms.
Oh.
So they make more or less good sense. I see there's another branch, just barely see it coming out and forming another point right here. So another one of this coming out. And even though I don't see the whole branch, I see a little bit of it coming out. I see a little bit behind leaves here. And my eye already finishes it up for me that it's heading to form all of this. You see?
Yeah.
And then it's lower again. There's a little bit of a, this one is so strong, it splits into more branches around here. And because it's splitting into a lot of branches, and it's kind of like one of our main ones.
Bunch of triangles.
Yeah, it starts forming a lot more shapes that all of them are pointing to. Like this one is creating this set of leaves, another one here, another one here, and they start overlapping, and so this is like the less distinct shape, and because of that it's good to keep it more or less lined up along this original oval shape, right?
I think I know what you're doing. You're trying to break up like some of the main, like, I guess, edges of the tree.
Just like you did with the lemon, you first drew a circle. And then you started chopping off the planes of the lemon, right?
Yeah.
And how it turns and where it's going. And then suddenly you found the point where it's the most pointy, right?
Yeah.
It's same thing.
Oh.
Except the edges in the lemon are much more defined. And here they're kind of fuzzy because of all the leaves overlapping and dangling in there, right? And it's kind of like, what kind of shape is it, really?
Yeah, where do I start?
Yeah, but what you do is you look how more or less all the leaves stop along one kind of ovally line, more or less, right?
More or less.
And then those that come out a little above that oval line, you make them come out a little, some may drop a little below it, but at least you get started with that oval line that gives you the main direction of where the tree is going and proportions, right? How this oval relates to the tree trunk and to this whole rectangle.
Also, are you just guessing what the branches look like inside? Because
I'm guessing in an educated way, right?
Oh.
I know that I see that this connection behind the leaves here is very strong. They're thick and you can see them through the leaves, right?
Yeah.
And you can walk in here and look. And so I see that this one is coming out, and even though you don't see where it's going all the way, you see some of it, you see a little popping in between the canopy here and there, and then you see this point. And then you look at the other tree branches and you see that it always has basically this kind of pattern. All your tree branches and then the leaves on top, right? That's your pattern.
Yeah.
So then you look for, okay, it's coming out this way, it starts splitting. I kind of start seeing where it's splitting, so there we go. I see this a little more of a triangular shape here. Therefore, this is where that tree branch is going. And if you just plain connect them and do this point here, it will already create what you're seeing. You're seeing the direction, your eye fills in, and even if you draw it over with lots of leaves, shaded and all, the viewer's eye will fill it in.
Oh.
Because you've originally planned it to go right to here, you see? And that's what you want. You want to first see what your eye fills in for you, and then even if you draw over it and cover it up, the viewer's eye will do the same thing. And they will feel like, wow, that's a realistic tree. And they wouldn't even know what you've drawn over and covered up and all. They do it subconsciously more like, because they've seen lots of trees all their lives.
Oh, yeah.
And you're doing it now consciously. You're now studying the tree and you're studying its structure. So I see that right along this one branch, there is actually another one. So, and they're very close, but one stands away from the other a little bit more. So right here is where they get close. Right here it stands away. They're also two very thick, strong branches. And I see that this one is starting to split a little earlier. Not way up here, but a little bit earlier here, and it does this. And because of that, we see another break in the canopy here. So I see that there's a whole bunch of leaves forming here from this shape, and another shape is forming here, and this is the shape that partially covers up.
Are those opening?
Those are more solid. This is where it's harder to see through because there's bunches of leaves close together.
Huh.
Yeah, because from this branch there's another one that's coming up this way, like that. And they're starting to cover up the other ones. And there's another branch that's coming out right from here, right to this corner. Remember, I placed this kind of angular corner in here?
Yeah.
There's one of the tree branches is heading here, creating kind of like this kind of shape, which is basically all the different leaves hanging.
There's a branch going down.
A very skinny one coming off of here. And so it's pointing right to this corner, which is kind of one of the lower corners of our canopy. See? The whole canopy, this is probably the one that comes closest to the ground. This one here is just a little bit higher. And so let's then figure out like what is happening in this area exactly. A bit hard to tell, but I see that there is a branch coming out this way. I want to just go and see where it's connecting. Okay, so it's this one. It's going this way, and connects to the main split in the branches.
It's more towards us.
Right, it's more toward us. That's why it's so hard to tell. And so I see this portion, and I see that it actually goes right back here. It has a couple of other pieces that split off, but basically this is the where it kind of forms a few points. The leaves are bunching up into more pointy ends, like this, kind of like this, and kind of like this, and blending with this mess over here. So I will shade it a little bit like this so you understand this is bunches of leaves. There's a bunches of leaves. And I'll leave just a little gaps in between, like I see a little gap here, I see a little gap here, I see a little gap here. Almost don't see it, but I'll put in a little spot in there so it makes sense. All right, our other branches here get covered up. I see a little bunches of leaves forming something shaped like this. It blends in with this other shapes. Now by now here we have so many of them overlapping that you can just unify this whole thing and say I only see a little bit of this tree trunk against the distant background. Then there's a whole bunch of leaves in here, but where all the leaves get really close together and form like a canopy that I can see through very well is all of this, all of this. I see that there's a canopy leaves and all are kind of like here. Behind there is a canopy, so there are leaves, but they are in the background and they're all in the shadow.
So you're sticking at the shadow parts now.
Yeah, And I'm leaving this a little bit lighter, I'm doing this a little bit darker. But between those leaves, there are bits of sky, right?
Yeah.
And so I've shaded them, but just so I don't forget that there is actually sky, and it's always good to have sky popping through.
Makes it look more realistic.
Yeah, I will go ahead and erase some portions and unify the others. And you also kind of look and you go like, what shape does this sky that's popping in between leaves do? Because it's formed by the leaves.
Pretty
So the
weird
sky also forms a kind of like a blobby shape that you can unify, you see?
Approximate?
Approximate, yeah. So,
It's pretty hard to stake out for when I see it. It looks like a triangle, but not really. Kind of like a chopped up, weird kind of rectangle.
right. There is a lot of sky popping in between the leaves, but this is a small sketch and I don't want to get into too many details. So I'll just say I will, whatever the biggest portions of the sky popping through, I'll leave them right here. And the rest will be just unified into one darker bunches of leaves shape. So see how I've carved it out? This is becoming like the style of my sketch. What I will do is I'll clean all of these edges now. And in much of the same manner, I'm going to go ahead and carve out all the edges of the tree canopy. And I'm going to make my tree trunk look more like it's that thicker tree trunk coming out from all those branches. And it's becoming wider toward the ground. Here's like a big tree branch that got cut off. Here's another tree branch that got cut off, touching the ground. Here's another one that was cut off.
So are you seeing more of the little more detail?
Yeah, I'm just throwing in all this little curiosity sort of details.
Curiosity?
Yeah, it's a small sketch, but those are big enough to add. Okay, so here's your tree trunk. I'm making it much darker because it is darker in value. Where is it the darkest? It's darkest right here. It's a little lighter where it goes toward the grass. Probably all the reflections.
Oh, are you going to add some of the grass details?
I don't know. Do you want me to?
I mean, if you want to. Just like the little details that it has like around here.
Yeah. And then this is the darkest portion of the tree trunk. I see that the shadow in there is pretty strong. Dark. And okay, so let's add the grass. So the grass comes up a little bit higher here.
Usually like darker.
Yeah. And then, but it's not so the tree trunk is looking just a little bit lighter than the grass, right? But it's not all that light actually, the tree trunk. So you can add your grass. And right here it's lower. And then behind the tree trunk, right in here, the grass is also much darker. Actually, right here I'll go to my darker pencil. It will be much easier.
You're not really cross-hatching it either. You're just kind of like,
yeah,
scribble.
So the grass behind the tree is much darker.
Would I have to do the grass?
You asked me to do the grass, so I thought you wanted to do the grass.
Oh, I just wanted to see how you do it.
Yeah. It's up to you. Let's see how much time it takes you to do the tree, and you can decide later.
Yeah, because when it comes to like little details like that, sometimes I I would see artists just like do cross hatching, some of them do scribbling like that. I just wanted to see.
All right, so here we go. So I've done the grass values right in, right? So I'm gonna go with my, skip ahead a little bit, darken this a little. See how with the harder pencil, when I push harder on the pencil itself, it starts to give me this more solid look, right? With the softer,
pencil are you using?
so this one is 2H. With the softer one, I push a little bit, it gives me very dark value, but it leaves big gaps in the paper. So it looks more fuzzy, right? So
Fuzzy.
right, that's why I will go with the harder pencil first, and I will go ahead and make all of these areas much darker with my harder pencil, just to cover up a lot of the paper, just the paper. Just to give it a little more solid look, less of the white paper coming through. And then I'll go over with my other So right now what I'm doing is I'm building up the value, because the tree greenery is actually considerably darker than white, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so because of that, we need to kind of build up the value. But not to lose where our darker areas are.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking, where is it the darkest?
And since the tree is distant away, like for the little details, you just like using eraser and just like.
You could, yeah. So again, this is a small sketch that I don't want to take too much time doing. I just want you to think about, how do I actually start drawing a tree? How do I see it? How do I follow all the shapes? How do I make sense of all the shapes, branches, canopy, right? The canopy is probably the most confusing part of drawing a tree in the beginning, until you practiced a little bit and found out more about how trees are. Different trees are different, but with practice you will start to understand more.
Of how canopies work?
I'm sorry?
Of how just trees in general work?
So alright, and so now I'm gonna go and actually go ahead and darken and do a little more of the squigglies, where I see how my darker, mostly in the shadow, leaves, where they are, what shapes they form, and darken those. And so even within lighter and darker areas, there's a lot of value changes.
There is.
For the sake of this sketch, I will only be changing
The big part?
the big parts. This is mostly dark, this is mostly light, this is mostly this is mostly that.
Putting more of a line art to it. When you usually put trees in like your drawings, do you just focus on the shape and values and the big part of the values?
Yeah. With the first sketch, you got to focus on the main shape and values. The smaller the sketch, the more you focus on the main shape, the more you abstract the shape of the tree.
And just be like, ah, yes, this is it.
The more abstraction needs to be done, the more you simplify everything.
But not simplify too much to the point where it looks like nothing.
Correct. Gotta simplify from the educated point of view, not senseless, not any like wild guesses, but guessing from a more educated point of view. So you see, since all of this area was already shaded somewhat for being in the shadow, I'm just doing my squiggles basically. I'm looking how those little groups of leaves, how they group into bunches that are more in the light and how they group into bunches that are more in the shadows. And then I just darken all of this. Here's where my light's popping through, right? The sky is popping through the canopy. Here's my branch. More of the leaves. Just darken all of that, unify them all. And let's see, this is where we see the branch stand against the canopy more. Here we see it. Here we see another one coming out. Here we see a little bit of this one. We see this one hiding behind some leaves and then coming out again, splitting. We see the splits. That's nice. This one is kind of hiding behind, but the splits are visible here. What about this one? We see it right here very distinctly. This is probably the darkest one right here. Then right here we see the split. One branch is coming off this way, one is coming up this way. Here it hides behind all this canopy, but I see it pop up over here. I see it starting to split over here like that. So right here I want to make sure that this stays a little bit lighter. I'm going to darken this more, and there's like some of the leaves are here in the sun, but mostly the branch is visible against all the leaves that are in the shadows. You see, it's not so visible among the leaves that are in the front and in the sun. Those leaves.
That's really cool. And that'll be the same for the bottom leaves too.
Yeah. And so you just kind of go in there and look for those groups of leaves that are behind the ones that are in the front and catching the sun, and kind of approximately even all you need to do is capture the basic idea, like the spirit of the tree. Not super precise down to last leaf, but how does this particular tree, how the branches work, how they split into smaller branches, how the leaves are grouped, how then the sun shines on once in the sun, how they are forming what kind of shape, and how the ones that are not in the sun in the shadows, what kind of shapes they are forming. See what I mean? So do you want to like go into a lot of details? Probably not. That's
gonna be too exhausting.
Right. So that's what you want to do. So what I'm doing is like I'm seeing like that's one group right here, mostly catching the sun, and comes from like one of those little splits. You see? Okay, so here's probably another one. Behind pops up another one. Here's another big one. It's very close to us. It's facing more toward us. Let's group that. Make sure it's all mostly in the light, right? And it's catching a lot of light, and it's coming forward, so that means behind it we'll darken it, push all those really back into the shadows. Within it, where we can add a little bit of the things pop through, right, the little darker things. Okay, here's another group. Here we go. It's like whole bunch of leaves coming off of all of this here. All of these branches splitting, kind of like that. And it's forming a big group of leaves that are mostly in the light. There's probably a little bit of grouping in between them that's happening. We can add a little bit of the darker areas, but mostly they're in the light. And this is mostly in the dark. And then what do we see in the back? In the back, some of it is darker, some of it is lighter as well. It's not all the same darkness.
Would you say that drawing a tree would be longer?
No. So you can do the same thing that I'm doing, just on a slightly larger scale. And
not much detail?
Yeah.
So basically what I did with the flower last time.
Correct. And you see how right here some of the leaves are like splitting off and forming this bigger gaps. So you can like just do it very sketchily. So it's not even as solid as all of this. They are now splitting further apart, and we're not seeing them as close together. Here we go. Here's our tree branch hiding in the shadows of the tree as well, overlapping by some of the leaves. And some of this one is more in the shadow, and some of it is more in the light. So let's get some of them into the shadows and some of them more into the light.
You know what's interesting?
What?
Like there's these like two leaves over there, like at the close branch, the close leaves over there, that's brown. So would you be focusing on that too?
No.
Oh, okay.
For this size of a sketch especially, no. Too fine of a detail. Right? If you wanted to do like a really big sketch, I would say, yeah, sure, big drawing and do more of the details. You could do that, perhaps, but you have to think about the scale, right? So the scale of your drawing, how big your drawing is compared to the actual tree. Even on the larger, like what you do in 18 by 24, right? Yeah. Although I told you divide it in half, so you'll be only doing half a page. For that scale, it might just be still too small of a detail to focus on.
So when you're like drawing, even if it's like a sketch or just like an artwork, then you have to really have to pay attention to like how big is the canvas.
Yeah.
And how big you're actually going to be drawing it.
Yep. Because some things you just have to let go. You can't possibly draw all the details. You got to make it look realistic enough, but not to where you go super into detail. That's too much. That is not the point of what we're doing here. You are just studying, right? You're studying the basic shape. You're trying to figure out how to draw any tree, but you're using this particular tree to learn.
Yeah. So it's like the flower too.
So what you end up concentrating is the basic structure. And the basic structure tells you what the leaves are doing, how they're grouped. You got to see groups of leaves, not individual leaves. And seeing those a couple of dry leaves, I know they stick out because they're lighter value, but seeing them so pronounced means that you haven't fine-tuned your vision. You're seeing too much details too soon, too all at once.
Yeah.
You got to concentrate on main shapes first. Seeing a whole tree and what kind of shape it's forming as compared to the little details in the tree.
So when you're like learning art, you're also like learning how to kind of look for a bigger picture and then just like break it down to smaller ones.
Right.
Even though it's not as easy as it seems, because like usually people are drawn to detail.
Yes.
So
And
they're just like,
people get
"Oh."
distracted by detail. So that's the main thing the young artists run into. They get distracted by too much detail too soon. You got to concentrate on less detail in the beginning and the main shapes, the main thing that is happening with the light, shadow, and so on. So, see, I even ended up darkening the tree trunk again a little bit to get more of the values done. And what we can do, if you want, I can even establish where the mountains are in the back, behind the tree. Kind of like that. And here, this is the mountain.
So you're giving a background a bit.
Because the background also has value, and compared to the background value is how the tree stands out, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, those are the mountains. Then there is another bush. I probably won't do it. It will be a bit too distracting. But here's your mountain in the back. And let's say that all of those potted plants, they form like another mess of shapes. And so,
A bush?
well, there is like a more distant bush on the edge,
Yeah, that's true.
right? So there is that other tree that's behind this tree. If you really wanted to, you could add that value in there, because there is another tree that's much darker that this tree canopy stands out against. You can add that. And notice how I started suddenly going with like lines cross-hatching,
Yeah.
because I want that white paper popping through.
Because it's a background.
Yeah, for the more like aerial perspective effect.
Yeah.
And if I go and cross them a little bit like that, it will look more airy, but it will look dark. And it will make my tree has a little more solid values with less paper popping through.
I see.
Pop up. Come closer to us. Right? So if you really want to do that, you can do that. It's not 100% necessary as a first try of a tree drawing, right?
Yeah.
But right here, our values should be more solid, the darks should be darker. Tree
Kind of looks like broccoli.
Yeah, it does look like a big broccoli shape. That's a good observation.
Yeah.
And broccoli heads look kind of like mini trees.
They do.
But that's why I'm saying all the plants, they're all somehow related to each other, right? You see all those similarities in them.
Yeah.
They use the structure for their advantage. So that structure of branching out exists, and the trees use it, and the broccoli uses it.
But people could, when they see the sketch, they're just like, oh, it's a tree. Because broccolis usually have like thicker, like stems-ish. And they don't really pop out that much so thin.
Yeah, so this will obviously look more like a tree to them.
Yeah, be like, oh, that's a really good tree.
There we go. So I think I'll just leave the grass the way it is.
Yeah, the main focus is the tree.
Alright, so if you can achieve something like this on the larger scale on your size paper, you would have achieved the first goal, learning to draw a shape of a tree. Okay?
Ah, I see. So then this would be like done because it's still sketch,
Yeah,
like more of a study.
right. A study, just a study.
Ah, okay.
Just to say that this is another tree in back, I'm going to make it look more like tree hanging back there. See, now the perked up, she heard the squirrel. Alright, so this is it.
Wow, a tree.
I guess I'll add a few squigglies here for the leaves. Alrighty. So today is the 15th, right?
Yeah.
So do you have any other questions?
No. So far, I think I understood what you were telling me.
Okay.
I guess it's just if I like, actually do it, let's just see what questions I have.
Good. Let's get to it.
Because usually when I hear stuff, like and really see it, I'm just like, oh, well, it makes sense. Yeah, like what you're saying. Like, look at the bigger picture. This is how high and tall it is. This is a basic shape. Break it down. Like separate the values. Oh, that sounds good. That sounds easy. And then I like spend like 2 hours trying to actually draw out the tree. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Alright, well, think of it as your main shapes first, right?
Yeah.
And then as you get more into the details, I'll be right behind you.
Okay. So am I going to be drawing like at this angle, or I guess I'm going